There are times that you need to act for God's sake. What is the action that you need to take? You need to violate a detail in the Torah, an aspect of the Torah, in order to preserve the Torah as a whole.
This video was made possible through the kind support of my sponsors over at Patreon. Patreon is a great way to help independent creators like myself produce original content. If you'd like to get more English language videos from me, please consider becoming a supporter via Patreon. You can find the link in the description below. Thank you very much.
So, shalom everyone. We are now at a special time in the Jewish calendar, we can say. First, we're after the Chagim and going into the year, going into the winter. But beyond that, we are now in between the first two weekly portions that deal with mankind as a whole, and going into the third parsha, which is Lech Lecha, which starts focusing on Avraham and his descendants, that is the Jewish people. The very fact that we have these two parashot opening the Torah is food for thought. So we are given so much information, so many stories about just the prehistory of humankind. All the stories about the creation of the world and about the first generations and about the flood and about the Tower of Babel. That's all behind us. But as we're moving into the story of Avraham, this is constantly in the background. The initial plan of God was not to select one people and have that one people be so secluded from the other nations and solely focused on, and only they should receive the commandments and so on. The original plan, which was actually had two sort of drafts to it, two attempts, was for all mankind to serve God and to worship God. First it was supposed to be the descendants of Adam, and then it was supposed to be the descendants of Noah. And only after these two failed attempts, one of them led to the sins that were punished by the flood, the other attempt led to the sin of the Tower of Babel, which the punishment was the dispersion of the tongues. After this, only the third attempt was zoomed in, focused in on Avraham and his descendants, and even that was a gradual process until it was sort of fine-tuned to Yaakov, and Yaakov merited to receive the divine name called Israel, which was really there waiting from before creation in order to see if mankind would be sufficiently refined in order to receive this name. So Adam was supposed to be Israel, and then Noah and his descendants were supposed to be Israel, but it ended up being Yaakov. So what is this telling us? It's telling us that what we've become so used to, the fact that we are one nation alone, one nation apart, one nation also persecuted. It's part of the deal. Anti-Semitism, it is said, was born with the giving of the Torah in Mount Sinai. The whole giving of the Torah to one nation goes along with the hatred that nation receives from other nations. Deep down, it's some sort of envy or some sort of competition as to who will be the chosen people. All this is telling us that this is just a temporary, albeit a long temporary, transitional stage to go back to the original vision. The original vision is that the light of the Torah and the light of the commandments and the whole notion of worshiping God is something totally universal and global. And in fact, the Bible, we can say, is sort of book-ended from both sides with this vision, because it begins with the first two parashot, which talk about all of mankind, and it ends with the many visions of the prophets, messianic visions, about all the world being filled with knowledge of God, and all the nations coming to Jerusalem, to Mount Zion, to learn the Torah, receive the Torah. And one particularly beautiful, poignant verse says, I shall turn to the nations, overturn to the nations, transform and create a clear distilled language, going back to the language from before the Tower of Babel, rectifying the sin of the Tower of Babel. There should be a clarified language, safa brura, likro kulam b'shem Hashem, so that all the nations may call upon God's name, leovdo shechem echad, that they can serve Him with one accord, with one camaraderie, shoulder to shoulder. This is what the verse is telling us. So we have the two parashot in the beginning, and we have all these messianic verses and visions about humanity coming together, world peace, and not just world peace in the terms of not fighting, but actually coming together and serving God together. Instead of confronting one another, standing side by side, facing God, and together receiving His constant words. So, and in fact, at this traditional stage, when we're talking about the portion of Lech Lecha, the story of Avraham, at first it's not clear to Avraham himself that he is supposed to be the father of one nation. He is blessed with being the father of many nations. He is trying to convert. The original meaning of conversion, it wasn't exactly what we now call conversion. It was bringing people to the monotheistic faith as it was revealed to him. So he was trying to get people to appreciate God's presence in the world and to appreciate the fact that He needs to be worshipped and blessed. And that's why, from his perspective, both his son, firstborn Ishmael, from the maidservant Hagar, and his second-born son from his wife Yitzchak, were both supposed to inherit his legacy and continue his legacy. And it was needed to be made clear to him via his wife that now actually there's a selection process has begun. It has begun with him already, but it continues with his son, it's going to continue with his grandchild. And he himself has a hard time facing this because he himself is still in the universal mindset. It's only really with Yitzchak that the more nation-focused mentality is coming into place. Even that is a temporary state, because Yitzchak is also in favor of Esav. It's not exactly clear, again, who is continuing. Now, all this is bringing me to the topic of this class. So the topic of this class is something that has been in the air for some years now. Many different Jews from many different denominations have been feeling this, intuiting this, somehow feeling or knowing or hoping that the time has come for something like this. Even more non-Jews have been intuiting this in different ways, and different attempts, some more kosher, some less kosher, have been done. The topic is raising the question, putting it out there that the time has come to start teaching Torah to non-Jews. This is the topic of the class. And this is not me saying, this is coming from a very dramatic class that Rav Ginsburg, my Rav, gave almost 10 years ago. It was Kaf Dalet Tevet of Tafshin Ayin Daled. So in the winter soon, in Tevet, it'll be the 10-year anniversary of this event, we can say. It started out as, relatively speaking, a regular class. We're used to all classes having a lot of chidushim, a lot of innovations and new ideas. Rav Ginsburg has a constant outflow of original Torah coming from the esoteric level of the Torah. So it's not new that the classes have novelties in them and things that we've never heard of. But this was in a league of its own. This was like a different level kind of novelty from the very beginning. Basically what he said was the following. He said, if you look at the history of the laws, the halachot, regarding Talmud Torah, the teaching of Torah, who you can teach Torah to and how you can teach Torah to, and exactly what's permitted and is not permitted, and so on, regarding the learning of Torah, if you look at that particular section of Jewish law, then in history there already have been 3 revolutions, real revolutions, in this particular area. Although the Torah itself is eternal and unchanging, and we know there will never be another giving of the Torah, and the Torah is not replaced, and so on, and this is one of the foundations of our faith, according to the Rambam. Despite this, as for the teaching of the Torah, the learning of the Torah, 3 dramatic revolutions have been made over time. All these are well known and some more, some less, quite established. And now it's time for a 4th revolution. This is how we began the class. Now we were all wondering what the first 3 are, what the 4th one is. Just to make it clear, I'm going to now go over all these revolutions, but the first 3 are established and well known, but no one, as far as I know, has ever put them in one series and said this is one continuous process, because they're very different from one another. And even more so, the 4th one. So before that, just one final introduction. The thing that all these 3 revolutions, and now the 4th one, have in common is that they all have employed a verse in Psalms, in Mizmor Kuf Yutet 119, the famous longest psalm, that is like a love song to the Torah, that has 22 times 8 verses. Every letter, we have 8 blessings for the Torah, beginning with that letter. So it's 22 letters times 8. So at some point, one of those later segments, there's a verse that in Hebrew goes, Et la'asot la'Hashem heferu toratecha. So there's a literal meaning and the reading of the sages, which is in itself revolutionary. And we can call it the spark of all the revolutions. The literal meaning is, it is time to act for God because they have violated your Torah. So when people are violating your Torah, it's time to stand up and act for God. This is a simple reading, nothing revolutionary about it. You see, people are violating the Torah, don't be still, it's time to act for God. The sages gave a revolutionary reading to this verse. And they said the following, they said, there are times, right, it is a time to act for God. There are certain times that you need to act for God's sake. What is the action that you need to take? You need to violate a detail in the Torah, an aspect of the Torah, a part of the Torah, in order to preserve the Torah as a whole. There are special times, they need to be recognized. You need to have a sensitivity to knowing what time it is. And there are special times that you need, that the commandment of the hour is to violate or let go of one detail in the Torah in order to save the entire Torah. When the Torah is at risk, of being totally forgotten or totally violated, then you, like, so to speak, you sacrifice one detail and then you preserve the whole thing. It's the same goes in other areas. If you have someone sick and you need to keep him well, and that requires violating Shabbat, then the saying goes, you violate one Shabbat, so then he could live and preserve hundreds of Shabbatot. So the same goes here, but on a much bigger scale. You need to violate an aspect of the Torah. The interesting thing is that first it appears revolutionary, but all these revolutions, after they happen, when you go back and look at the sources, you find retrospectively all kinds of hints and allusions that really it was supposed to happen. You think it's what we call bedi'eved, that is post factum. It's only because something bad happened we were forced to sacrifice one element of the Torah to preserve the whole Torah. But after that happens, that is indeed how it appears in the beginning. After some time passes, people look back and they say, we can't imagine Judaism being any other way. It was so foundational to the formation of what Judaism is all about. And more than that, we can go back and find all kinds of verses, but it can only happen afterwards. You can go back and you say it wasn't really a revolution. It had to happen. And the external forces that threatened Torah were just an excuse, were just a means, a historical means for God to enable that revolution to take place. This whole thing touches upon something very profound in the way the Torah comes into the world and appears gradually in the world. The giving of the Torah is, relatively speaking, a one-time event. It was the giving of the Torah Mount Sinai, then was written over 40 years. It's a very short period of time. But then the Torah, so to speak, evolves within reality. Reality is time-bound. Things constantly evolve. The Jewish people evolve. The world evolves. And the oral Torah, for example, is constantly evolving with reality, with the times they are changing. And in fact, this is part and parcel of God revealing himself. God did not intend for everything to be there explicitly, overtly in the giving of the Torah. It was there implicitly. It was folded and folded into the Torah, and this unfolding takes place over times. And every once in a while, it's not just evolution, it has to be a revolution also. Most of the time it's evolving. Gradually, all the learners of the Torah are sitting together and are learning, and then they're coming up with new interpretations, new ideas, new subtle readings of the text, and so on. This is the evolution. But there are also times for a revolution. And this revolutionary aspect is part of God. God is both a conservative and a revolutionary. In every revolution, you have people for the revolution, people against the revolution. Those against the revolution are conservative types. And the more for the revolution are more the liberal types. Today, in today's politics, everything's upside down. Sometimes it could be the other way around. But generally, these two forces exist in the world. They also exist in the Torah. They also exist within God himself. So the conservative aspect is encapsulated in the unchanging Torah coming into the world, and the evolutionary and revolutionary aspects of God are there in the oral Torah and in the unfolding and also in these revolutions. Okay, enough introductions. What are the revolutions? So, revolution number one. That's the most well-known and the most established because it's the most ancient. This was performed by Rabbi Yehuda HaNassi, and this was the writing of the oral Torah. The oral Torah was not supposed to be written. It was said very clearly, Dvarim shebe'al peh hi ata rashay le'omran bichtav. Things that are orally transmitted, it is forbidden to write them. People could write them for themselves in order to help them memorize, but there was no official publication of what became the Mishnah. The Mishnah, the whole writing down of the Mishnah was the revolutionary act of Rabbi Yehuda HaNassi. Rabbi Yehuda HaNassi said explicitly, he used this verse, Et la'asot la'Hashem, heferu toratecha, it is time to act for God. How? By violating this principle of not writing the oral Torah. Why? Because if I wouldn't write it, it's going to be forgotten. The second temple was destroyed. Enough years have passed to make it clear that it's not going to be rebuilt for the third time anytime soon. We're still waiting. And the people were becoming dispersed. And then he realized we have to write it down. And by encoding it and writing it down, it'll ensure that people will indeed remember it and continue to learn it. This has changed Judaism completely. We wouldn't have all these books and all these other books and all of the Jewish libraries, all of the Bet Midrash. We wouldn't be the people of the book, maybe just the book, one book, but not. We're not the people of the book. We're the people of the Bet Midrash, the people of the library, the people who know many, many different books. All the wise rabbis, they know a lot of books. They read a lot of books. All this came out of this one decision by Rabbi Yehuda HaNassi. You have to write it down. And this was shocking and revolutionary, but it changed everything, and it saved the Torah. It saved Judaism. This is revolution number one. Revolution number two is credited to Rabbi Yosef Karo, who wrote the Shulchan Aruch, but even before he wrote the Shulchan Aruch, when he wrote the commentary for the Maimonides treatise, Mishneh Torah, which is the major treatise that summed up all of Jewish law, all of the Talmud, all of the conclusions of the Talmud, as he saw them in one book. Many of the Rishonim, the early medieval sages, said this. He wasn't the only one, but he said so in the most clear way, and he used this verse. it's time to act for God. What was the second revolution? So the sages in several different places, and Maimonides repeated this even more sharply, forbade receiving money, a salary, both for learning Torah and for teaching Torah, for dealing with the Torah. Al ta'aseh et Torah kardom lachfor ba. Don't use the Torah as a means to make a living, to be wealthy or even to make a living. No, you have to work in a regular job, and then you also have to learn and you have to teach. And Maimonides was very harsh in this. He said that everyone who does this, chilel et Hashem, he unsanctifies. How do you call it? He what's the word for lechalil? He desecrates the name of God, and he violates the Torah, and he loses he hurts himself, and he loses his place in the world to come. And like the worst things you can say, he said this. Then came Rabbi Yosef Karo, and in a lengthy commentary on this one bit in Maimonides, he said, times have changed, times they are changing. There are too many books to learn. It takes too much time to learn them and to teach them. Working, many people need to work full time. They can't do like in the olden days, separate their days, so they're half a day they're working and half a day they're learning. You can't work this way, you can't learn Torah this way. You need to have an official position of a rabbi with a salary. And the rabbi gets a salary, and then he can learn, and then he can teach, and then he can guide his community. And this is now totally the norm everywhere in the world. But this was a revolution. This was the second revolution in the laws of the learning of Torah and teaching Torah, Hilchot Talmud Torah, performed in the 16th century by Rabbi Yosef Karo. Third revolution. The sages in many different places forbade fathers from teaching their daughters Torah. The Torah was male-centric. It was only for men. There were occasional women who would, of their own accord, of their own volition, go and study. This was not forbidden for them. But of course, it's extremely hard if you haven't been educated to do so from a younger age. And the main common principle was that Torah learning is not for women. Maybe they can study. They always needed to study the laws that were relevant for their lives, that they needed to perform, but they weren't supposed to go deeper into the Mishnah or the Talmud. Again, there were always exceptions to this rule, but this was the rule. And in fact, Maimonides said that most women cannot learn seriously. That's what he said. Who made the third revolution? So it actually starts with a woman. Her name is Sarah Schneerer. And she was the one who saw that women were going out and learning in the universities. They were going and learning secular studies. They were very clever and they were very successful, and that created a huge crisis in the Jewish world because they became very learned in worldly matters, and their husbands were only learned in Torah, and there was this terrible gap, and it was a big, big problem. And so the person credited with this is her, but we need a rabbi to give the stamp. So this was the Chafetz Chaim. It wasn't just him. It was also the Rebbe of Gur. It was the Rebbe Rayatz. But primarily it was the Chafetz Chaim who, in a letter to Sarah Schneerer, wrote, Et le'asot le'Hashem, eferot Toratecha. It is time to act for God and to violate this principle of not teaching Torah to women because they're learning anyway, and the world is different, and they need to learn Torah, and then the gates have been opened. They were later opened further by the Lubavitcher Rebbe. The Lubavitcher Rebbe, in a famous talk in Lag BaOmer, he said that although the world seems to be going in a more sort of secular and anti-religious direction, and everything is distancing itself from the holy past and the traditions and so on, but he said there's one exception to this rule, and this is the rise of the feminine, the rise of women's rights, the women's liberation movement. All this is a holy spark within this very secular, rebellious age, which is anti-tradition. This one thing is actually for the good, because it's part of and this, he was coming from a Kabbalistic source that says that the feminine is evolving and gradually on the rise, and the Messianic vision is that the male and the female are absolutely equal, and they both share completely in God's light, in God's vision, and so on. This was long before feminism, written by the Holy Ari, Rabbi Isaac Luria, the greatest Kabbalist. So the Rebbe knew all this, and he said that they can learn anything that they want. It's not just what they learned in Beis Yaakov. It's any and all, anything they desire. If they want to go into the Talmud, they want to. And he even said that to study Chassidut, it's absolutely equal. They need to know, not just if they want or not. It's just basic for every Jew today, is to understand what is God, what is the soul, what is the meaning of life, how do we approach God, what does it mean to stand before God, what does it mean to pray, and so on. The steady commandments, the constant commandments we're all doing are shared by men and women. And he completely opened the gate, says whatever you want, people. And he even went as far as saying that with the Rambam saying that most women cannot learn is no longer reflective of reality. It almost sounds reform. But again, for the reform people, everything is changing and you can reinvent the Torah, you can do whatever you want. But he said, not in everything, but again, in this respect, they have something, they have a point. The point is that the feminine is really on the rise, and that really needs to change. So these are the three revolutions, and they're all very big, and they all changed. The third one we can say is still ongoing. Right? It's not as established. If you go and teach Torah, you also know sometimes the second revolution is also not completely established. And some people, they still find it weird that you would be paid to. But it's much more established because there's a rabbi with a salary, and the third one is still ongoing because there are more and more places for women to learn Torah. If the people at home would sit here, they would see that we are almost entirely women in the room. There's one representative of the male gender. And this is a typical Hassidic class. That's everywhere. Whatever you do, wherever you go, wherever you advertise. Today I've enjoyed the Pardes Chana, sort of fathers group. Didn't help. And that's the way it is. That's the way it is. So all this led to Rav Ginsburg in that very revolutionary class, saying all this is leading up to the fourth revolution. And people were like, yeah. And he said, so the fourth revolution is that all the prophets are speaking of an age that all the nations will come to the Jewish people and will learn Torah and will share in the Torah and will receive God's light as it appears through the Torah, because it's one thing to be attached to God in a direct way through prayer, but the Jewish secret, the Jewish revolution in some ways, the Jewish besorah, Jewish gift to the world, is that the learning of the Torah and going into the verses and the stories and the details and the Hebrew in it, not just what you can get from the Bible, but also what you get through the lens of the sages. Everything that we call Torah, both the written Torah, the oral Torah, all the wealth, all the orchard, the huge pardes that is sprouted out of our sources, everything that can elevate the non-Jew, we need to start sharing with the non-Jew. Everything that can bring light to the world, connect them to God, that can give them blessing, that can help them understand themselves and the world and their families and their relationships, and God, and how to treat God, how to live in the light of God every day in every area in your life. And this has to be taught universally to all nations. And because we'll never get to the point of serving God together, as the prophets say, if we don't begin somehow. We can say we can put it down to Mashiach, and he'll come and he'll do it. But in everything, in all the areas, we need to start. We need to sort of provoke and begin bring this new light into the world, and then it'll increase. And then the first thing that was said to him was, well, this is not new. We've known for generations that we have the 7 Noahide commandments, and the 7 Noahide commandments every person in the world is obligated to perform. And in fact, the Rebbe was very insistent on people on teaching the 7 Noahide commandments to all the nations. And then he said, yes, but it's not enough. It's not just. It doesn't make any sense for any sensible non-Jew to look at those 7 very, very basic laws, which most of them perform anyway, even if not consciously, maybe not consciously aware that it's the 7 Noahide commandments, but they're about being a decent human being, basically. Some of them are a bit more special, but it doesn't make any sense for a non-Jew to you come up to him and you give him the laws. Doesn't mean anything. It has to be part of something much, much bigger, a worldview, a wisdom, a wealth of wisdom, a whole Torah. It has to be something far more profound. And in fact, there are how do you say takdim in law? A precedent. There are precedents. The precedents is that if someone is like considering to convert, he's not decided, but he's considering to convert, you can teach him Torah. The Rambam said you can teach Torah to Christians. He was against teaching Torah to Muslims because he said they don't believe in the Bible, in the Hebrew Bible. The Christians do believe that it's completely God-given. They just believe that there's another added book. But for Muslims, they totally don't accept this book. So, but Rav Ginsburg said, no, now it's also that has to change. It's like for everyone. We really need to find a way to teach them all. And then there was like a barrage of questions. And one of the questions was, wait, the first 3 revolutions were about saving Judaism, saving the Torah. Why do we violate an aspect of the Torah in order to save the entire Torah? How is this saving the Torah? So he said, if the Torah doesn't change, if the Torah doesn't evolve, it'll fade away, it'll disappear. And many Jews today, one of the elements, not the only one, but one of the major elements that is hindering, that is stopping many Jews from connecting to the Torah is the fact that it doesn't give anything, it doesn't address the universal question, the question of all of humanity, all of mankind. That's the one thing. And you'll see, so another question was, are we done with giving Torah to all the Jews? There are so many Jews who are disconnected, they know nothing, they don't know the first thing about Judaism, about Yiddishkeit. Are we going to now forget about them and go to the non-Jew? He said, it's a two-way street. There are some Jews that will never come to your Torah class. They will only come when they see that you're teaching a non-Jew. That'll spark their interest. And all the more so if it starts trending among non-Jews. Then they'll join and they'll come. And so it's for everyone. It's for the sake of the many non-Jews who are thirsty for Torah, and they're thirsty anyway, all over the world, in America and in South America and in Africa and in the Far East, and the most well-known is South Korea, but it's far more than that. And anyone who opens a YouTube channel in any language that isn't Hebrew knows that very quickly most of his viewers, most of his followers are not Jewish. And so they're coming anyway. And if they're not going to receive it from proper teachers, they're going to receive it from people who are not proper teachers, and that's already happening. So it's like the world has changed. Technologically, it's changed. Everything is being opened up. So we have to realize that all this is basically signaling to us that the time has come to start sharing the Torah with the rest of the world. So of course it raises a ton of questions, because many aspects of the Torah are very clearly only for Jews. But he says there are so many things that are for everyone. There are so many things that we've learned and we can teach, especially when you're teaching to someone who's not religious. Anyway, you have to translate it or explain it in a way that's relevant to you as a human being, because many of them, they don't see themselves so much as Jews. They see themselves as human beings, modern human beings. Why is the Torah relevant to my life? So we look at the Torah and we see all the things that are relevant to your life, and then we can explain them. And this automatically is also relevant to non-Jews. Just a brief interlude. I'll share a little story. So a few years after this big class, 5 years ago, I was in India with my family. We were substituting in a Chabad house in North India. And it's a little town that all the spiritual seekers go there to learn meditation and to learn yoga and all this. And it was a Chabad house, and all the Israelis came, and there were Torah classes, and there were Shabbat dinners and so on. And then I said to myself, well, the fourth revolution is going on. I need to do something, also for the fourth revolution. So we rented a place outside the Bet Chabad, and I asked Rav Ginsburg, should we say it's for non-Jews? He said, no, just keep it for everyone. Put it up in English, put it all over town, and it was introduction to Kabbalah. Everyone's invited, and indeed all kinds of people came, non-Jews from all over the world. And there were also some Jews who came. What kind of Jews came? It was the Jews who wouldn't set foot in the Chabad house. They don't want to go there. It's too Jewish for them. They don't want to go there. There was this guy that we met, and he was into Mayan astrology. And he was deeply into Mayan astrology. And he didn't want anything to do with Judaism. And we kept inviting him, come to the Chabad house, come to Shabbat dinner. He says, no. And then at some point he said, you said you're going to do this international class, I'll go to the international class. And he came to the international class. And so he sat. And so this Jew sat in the class and listened to a Torah class in English. He was Israeli. I was Israeli. I was teaching in English, and he was there learning. So this was just it proved what Rav Ginsburg said. It demonstrated to be absolutely true. Now, before we finish, I'm just going to add yet another level to all of this. This is a big, big thing. We can go on and on about it. Just now, this book finally came out. This is the book about the fourth revolution. Just came out in Hebrew. It waited 9.5 years. Meanwhile, after that class, Rav Ginsburg went on and on about the fourth revolution, and he added more layers and more understanding of how the four revolutions go together, and how important it is to stressing again and again the importance of the fourth revolution. So I'll just add one important element that really completes the picture. All these four revolutions are based on four hidden revolutions in the level of the esoteric wisdom of the Torah, the Kabbalah. Each one of them was enabled by a Kabbalistic revolution. And this is very easily demonstratable. It's very beautiful. How could Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi allow himself to take the oral Torah that is live, that is constantly changing, it's not written down? How could he allow himself to say, now it can all be written down? Because at the same time, a contemporary of his, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, sat with his son and 8 more friends. It was just 10 people sitting in a room, going in the forest, sitting in a cave, and they were studying the mysteries of the Torah in what would become later on the Zohar. And it wasn't written down. It was written down only for them. When was the Zohar finally published or put to paper? Only over 1,000 years later, in the 13th century. But back then it was completely oral. So in a way, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai took upon himself to carry on the oral tradition in a new way, the mysteries of the Torah. The Mishnah was also called the mysteries of God, by the way, but it was still the revealed level of the Torah. It was the mysterious, hidden, oral part of the revealed aspect of the Torah. And then when it was written down, this was enabled by the fact that there was a new oral Torah that was, for many generations, is not going to be written. And so that sort of enabled Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi to say, okay, we can now write down the oral Torah, and it'll be okay because now we have a new group, a very small group sitting somewhere, and there's a new oral Torah, the Kabbalah, the Zohar, that is being kept alive. What enabled Rabbi Yosef Karo to say that it's now okay to receive money for learning Torah and teaching Torah, whereas before it was supposed to be Mesirut Nefesh. It was supposed to be something you do for its own sake. You study Torah completely for its own sake. Don't involve money in it. You need to do it l'shem shamayim, for heaven's sake, completely for heaven's sake. What enabled him to do this? Because he had a contemporary in his own little town of Tzfat. His name was Rabbi Isaac Luria, the Holy Ari, the Arizal. The Arizal and his group were again a little Kabbalistic group, and it was unthinkable they would receive money to learn this. They did it completely for heaven's sake. They would meet and he would bring out all these amazing mysteries, explaining the Zohar from the previous generation. And this was completely not for any gain, not for any benefit. It was completely just to learn to understand the mysteries of the Torah. And so he saw this group and he said, okay, so now we have these people that are totally going all the way without any sense, without any benefit, no gain, to learn the Torah. Now I can say that it's okay to receive money for learning Torah and for teaching Torah. What enabled the Chafetz Chaim to say women can study Torah? So this was this was actually before, but it was growing more and more. Chassidut started including the male and the female. They started saying that the males, the men, should cultivate their feminine aspect, and women should cultivate their masculine aspect. How did they say this? Because all of Chassidut is, in many ways, it's very much a feminine Torah. Chassidut is a feminine Torah. Musar, the old ethics, the traditional ethics, is more masculine in nature. It's sort of a lecturer type ethics. It's the book lectures to you. And the teacher, the giver of the Musar, would also be a lecturer. Lehatif Musar is to sort of sprinkle truths upon you from above. This is the way you need to behave, and these are the bad traits, you need to get rid of them, these are the good traits, you need to work on them. And this was very cerebral. Chassidut was totally different. Chassidut was all about finding indirect routes into the heart. Through a story, through music, through drinking and eating together, and even the way they taught. All of this was to divert the rational mind and surprise the heart and get into the heart. And all this is to get into the heart in the heart's terms, not in the intellect's terms. All this it's feminine work. It's feminine mentality. So all the chassids, if you compare them to non-chassids, there's something more effeminate about it, but in a good way. That is, they cultivate a feminine side of working on their own hearts and wanting the Torah to really filter down and enter their own hearts and not remain on some cerebral, intellectual level like the tradition of non-chassids. And once you do go there, it goes in the two ways. Then you have, and indeed Chassidut had more of them than other branches, you had unique women who would start studying and learning, because once the filter is open and it diffuses in both directions, the men become more effeminate, there's more understanding between the men and the women. They start learning with the women start learning with the men, the women become more well-read, and that's what happened in Chassidut. There are many stories in Chassidut of the daughters of the Rebbe and the wives of the Rebbe and other women who were very sharp and very acute and very, very into Chassidut and learned. And it was a process. First, it was only the husbands would come to the Rebbe. Later, the women would also come to the Rebbe. But this began to operate in the Hasidic world, and this, in a way, enabled or paved the way for the third revolution. What paves the way? What has paved the way for the fourth revolution of teaching Torah to non-Jews? This was the emphasis placed by the Lubavitcher Rebbe on the concept that we are now in the beginning of the time of the coming of Mashiach. That Mashiach coming is a real possibility. And that means that we need to start learning Torah through the lens of seeing it as a Messianic Torah. That the Messianic Torah is upon us. That if you learn Chassidut, you learn the inner dimension of the Torah deeply enough, and you learn about the concept of redemption, and everything that you learn through the eyes of redemption, through the lens of redemption, then the Messianic Torah is coming to the foreground. And he's talked about this endlessly. And just talking about this and bringing this light into the world, this was the clear and direct inspiration and the paving of the way for what Rav Ginsburg proposed, that the world, that the Jewish world should accept this concept of the fourth revolution. So, this is our very hefty, important class for today. It's something that we, the students of Rav Ginsburg, have been talking about for the past 9.5 years, all the time, learning this, thinking about this, starting to work on this. Everyone who's teaching has this in mind when they're teaching, and it's something that all the Jewish world and the non-Jewish world should be aware of. Rav Ginsburg is not the only one who's doing this. Once it starts rolling, it's like everywhere. Then you realize that more and more rabbis, in different ways, are going into this. It's still a work in progress in terms of what exactly are the right balances and what's the right way of going about this, and how do you do the fourth revolution without it leading, for example, into intermarriage, which is totally forbidden. And the whole separation, the whole havdalah between the Jewish people and the non-Jewish people stays put. The fourth revolution does not mean that the lines between Jews and non-Jews are blurred. But it does say that there needs to begin a kind of cross-fertilization of Jews teaching, giving the light of the Torah, the wisdom of the Torah to the nations. And also, this is a whole other topic, also learning, taking in the wisdom of the nations, the wisdom of science, the wisdom of all kinds of ideas, and in a way, refining them, converting them, incorporating them into the Jewish world. This is a two-sided vision. But the part we focused on in this class is the fact that we need to start sharing the light, and it does raise a lot of questions. It is a big challenge how to do this in a proper way, but we should not be deterred by the challenge. That's the main message of all of this. We need to see it not as a challenge that cannot be overcome, and even addressing the fact that today anti-Semitism is on the rise, and we are currently at war, and we have enemies, actual physical enemies we're fighting, and allies that those enemies have in other nations that are constantly saying terrible things about us and supporting their enemies and so on, is in fact part of the same thing, the same kind of boldness, right? Our war began with Gaza. Now it's not just Gaza. Gaza is in Hebrew it's Aza, which is the root of azut, boldness, and it calls upon us to develop or remind ourselves of a kind of Jewish boldness that we maybe once had, we lost, we're now regaining it. The same kind of boldness that we need in order to fight the war and stand up for ourselves. It's not just to push away the threat, but also to start projecting outwards the light and the vision of the Torah. The vision for how, for example, how wars are conducted and how real peace can be made. And the vision that balances, the vision of peace, wanting peace, but also being ready to be at war and ready to rid the world of universal threats. It's the same energy, it's the same boldness, it's the revolutionary boldness of all these revolutions. We need to stand up and fight, and we need to stand up and teach. And these two things are not contradictory, they're absolutely the same. And part of what's going on now is that the whole world is like a test for, not just for us, do we rise to the challenge or not? It's a test for the whole world. Which side are you on? Which side do you take? Are you siding with the villains? Are you even clear on who the villain is? And if you think it's the other way around, you need to think very carefully and just look at the entire picture. And so this is like a test for all of the world, and this is part of the whole process. It's not something we should say, oh, well, now that this war is going on, clearly it's not time for the fourth revolution, we'll wait for it to calm down. No. All these wars are more and more wake-up calls for us to fully resume our original position as the teachers and the blessers of all of mankind. And then we can also, then we can have this kind of cross-fertilization between us and the non-Jews. So, thank you so much, and B'ezrat Hashem will continue maybe developing these ideas in future classes.
Hi everyone, if you enjoyed this episode, please press like, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment. If you want more English language videos from me, please consider becoming a supporter via Patreon. You can find the link in the description below. Thank you very much, and see you in the next episode.